In Pokrovsk, the number of firefights involving the air assault forces is increasing, but so are the enemy's losses from direct fire. According to your information, what is happening there right now?
There are indeed urban battles taking place in Pokrovsk, and their intensity is clearly going to increase. On one hand, in the southern part of the city, that is where the Russians are mainly concentrated. There also are strong points there, isolated pockets of resistance, but they are essentially operating cut off from the main forces. On the other hand, in the northern part of the city, the situation is the opposite. Our forces are mainly operating there, but there are some spots where the enemy has managed to break through, and efforts are underway to contain and eliminate them. Obviously, the main objective of our command in Pokrovsk itself is to hold the northern part of the city and the industrial zone first and foremost, in order to maintain a secure corridor through Pokrovsk to Mirnorad, which serves as a kind of outpost on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk-Mirnorad defense area. And by the way, Mirnorad is holding out quite firmly. But if the enemy manages to make additional advances through Pokrovsk, then the Mirnorad military group of forces will have to be withdrawn. Perhaps there are certain advantages to this course of action, as it could straighten the front line and strengthen the flanks of the Pokrovsk pocket. But it's too early to talk about that for now. The main enemy forces advancing on Pokrovsk are the Second Army, which is operating from the south. It seems to me that the fighting in Pokrovsk is not actually their main objective. On the contrary, their goal is to tie down and pin our forces in order to allow the Second Army to advance. Time and again, month after month, they try to bypass Pokrovsk from the southwest in the area of Urozhain in that direction. The second half of this battle is to the north of Pokrovsk in the Mirnograd grouping, where the enemy's 51st Army is advancing. And well, here the situation is looks different. On one hand, the 51st Army, having pushed towards Dobropilia, basically made a kind of false start. Their forces there are still being cleared out by our brigades and corps. Most of the Russian prisoners of war who have been captured during the ongoing conflict are coming from this particular direction. And if this carefully planned maneuver, this coordinated and deliberate series of counterattacks, is actually carried through to its intended conclusion, its natural conclusion, then these brigades, our brigades, could serve as an additional reserve force to eliminate the Russian incursion of the 51st Army from the north around Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad. On the other hand, the Russians are clinging very tightly to the ground here. They understand that they have a chance to encircle Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad. That's why they're bringing in Marine brigades here, following the 155th Vladivostok Brigade, which has already been actively engaged there for some time. It has been involved in active operations. It seems they've also brought in the 40th Brigade, that's Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky from Kamchatka. In this way, the shortage of forces and the attrition of those Russian units being inflicted by Ukraine's defense forces is being compensated for by bringing in additional reserves. How successful will they be at this? It's hard to say. Once again, Ukraine's plan is to wear down the enemy's offensive potential. Understanding that the offensive has only just begun, the first stage is the most difficult because the resources reserved for the second and third stages of the offensive operation, due to the inability to accomplish the first stage, will be redirected to its execution. That's why heavy fighting lies ahead, but the outcome in any case ends up being the same. Right now, our goal is to weaken the enemy's capabilities going forward. Whether we will be able to hold Pokrovsk and Mirnorad, I don't know. But they continue to be especially important in the sense that Pokrovsk-Mirnorad, this is the strategic flank and a potential route for the Russians to get behind our Kostiantynivka-Druzhkivka defense. That salient north of Drushkivka, which they are still trying to eliminate, I have always considered a false start by the Russian 51st Army, which in fact revealed the intentions of the Russian command. This is also connected to the increased activity. The enemy's actions now in the Kostiantinivka direction along the front and the active operations by the Russians in the Lyman direction, who still believe they can cut off the Kostiantinivka Druzhkivka group, our forces, and then they would need forces from the north, from the Lyman direction, to advance on Lyman. Essentially to eliminate our Severodonetsk salient, the entire northern area as well. I do not believe that the Russian occupiers will be able to carry out this plan, but nevertheless, despite everything, Shoigu. Stand down, half-dead Shoigu. Yes, Gerasimov. He gave Putin a lot of promises in advance. Now he has no other choice but to try to prove that his words were not just lies, but were in fact statements that he is determined to support with real actions. In this moment, he must show through his behavior and decisions that what he said was not empty talk, but something he truly intends to stand behind and make real. For this, he won't spare people, equipment, or anything at all.
Pavel, next I would like you to comment and essentially give your analysis of what we saw last night. We understand that the enemy today launched such a combined missile attack, and as a result, several cities and accordingly regions were affected. We saw Kiev region, and we also reported in the news about the explosions that occurred in Kharkiv. Now information is coming in and public channels are reporting which sites were affected in Ternopil, Lviv region, the city of Lviv itself, and so on. And in doing so, they used rocket missiles, cruise missiles, aeroballistic missiles, as well as Shaheds, and so on. These Geron 2 drones in particular are responsible for the damage and fires in Kharkiv. What is your assessment of what we are witnessing right now? And Pavel, if we look ahead, we understand that winter is approaching, so what should we possibly expect from the enemy? And will we see a certain increase in Russia's efforts to stockpile resources, particularly missiles, in order to, I don't know, perhaps shift the focus from using unmanned aerial vehicles to this particular type of legitimate targets for Ukraine?
I don't think so. Judging by the actions of the Russian occupiers, overall they have found what they consider the most optimal strategy in terms of the ratio between drones and missile systems, ranging from ballistic to cruise missiles in combined strikes, both in terms of the structure of their forces and their targets. The fact that today's strike was anticipated and expected is confirmed by our intelligence data and analysis. And the enemy had been trying for several days prior to conduct satellite reconnaissance of the areas that ultimately became the centers of today's strike. But it is a continuation of the previous massive strike on Kiev. Remember, whether it was surprising or not, it was clear that not all forces were used in the strike on Kiev. Strategic aviation was not involved. Strategic aviation's cruise missiles were hardly used, and the Black Sea Fleet Group was almost not involved at all. But they could have been used. This means they were kept ready to deliver a follow-up strike. Well, a double tap, roughly speaking. So the second shot has been fired. It's possible that the Russians will continue to try using this kind of strike tactic in the future. A strike, then reconnaissance, then a repeat strike after a few days of massive attacks. If we've seen these elements in pinpoint strikes, yes, in missile strikes, drone strikes on specific targets, a strike after additional reconnaissance to finish the job, then now obviously they're trying to expand this tactic to strategic strikes.
Pavel, thank you so much.